Let's now bring in tonight's panel, because with me, Christian Lemitz, who's Head of Political Economy at the Institute of Economic Affairs. Christian, lovely to see you. Broadcaster and psychotherapist Lucy Beresford. And at the end there, former First Minister of Scotland, Alex Salmond. How nice to see you all. Welcome. Feel free to, engage.
It's great
speak.
to be here, Mike.
Yes. Well, let me come to you first, because, you are a politician, and the question was raised there about all manner of things to do with this, this court decision that's been made by the Supreme Court. A lot of people think it's a political decision. I don't know whether you think that, whether the Supreme Court should be able to make rulings on stuff like this. I don't think they should.
Well, you see, look, Rishi Sunak, it says here, I'm losing patience.
Yeah.
So he's really angry. He was behind the podium, but I have it reliable authority stamped his feet.
Oh, really?
Twice.
Wow.
During the press conference. So, if Rishi Sunak's angry, then, it'll all be sorted very soon.
Yes.
Absolutely. Incidentally, they must have had a really bad case, because if Lord Reid, who's one of the sookiest judges to the government in judicial history,
yeah.
If Lord Reid finds against the government, then their case must have been really bad. Lord Reid, when he was in the Hong Kong Supreme Court, stayed on the Court of Appeal in Hong Kong, even after the Chinese government was countermanding some of his rulings.
Yes.
So it must have been a dreadful government case for Lord Reid to find against it. But now that Rishi Sunak's really, really losing patience and very angry,
yeah.
I'm sure it'll all be sorted soon. After all, it's only 140 million so far.
Yes.
For absolutely nobody.
Well, apparently what they've been doing is making sure that they can increase the numbers of people that can't go there. Lucy.
Well, the problem is that we're probably only 12 months away from an election.
Yeah.
And so anything that Rishi Sunak is proposing doesn't actually have that much time to be brought into play.
Yes.
And it's very interesting, because one of the things he wants to do is to put legislation out there to deem Rwanda as safe. And there's this fantastic line in Hamlet, which basically says, there's nothing that's good or bad, but thinking makes it so. So if Rishi Sunak says that Rwanda is safe, then that's what it's going to be. And I don't think that's how it's worked.
From Hamlet on this show, this is what it's
very
all
classy.
About. Christian, the thing about this story, really, though, is that people have been spending the entire day discussing Rwanda, when Rwanda's not really the story. The story is the illegal migrants. The story is the legal migration, which has risen to such an extent that, nobody knows why it's so high and how they're going to get it down. So, in the end, the people of Britain have been sort of abandoned in all of this. Lots of legal arguments being made. But we're going nowhere, really, aren't we?
It doesn't look that way, no. I was a bit confused today by Sunak's reaction, because his first reaction was completely different from what we read now. He first said, oh, well, don't worry, this isn't a big deal.
Yeah, they've said, in principle, they think it's a good thing.
Yes, we'll just tweak it a little bit, and next week we will have a new Rwanda deal, and that one will be fine. And then suddenly he comes up with emergency legislation saying, as you said, it is now safe because I say so. Now, which is it?
Right.
But either way, this is surely something that the court has been discussing for a while, and they should have known where the stumbling blocks are. You would expect, if there is a way to tweak it, if there's a way to tweak the Rwanda deal to make it court-proof, why not do that straight away?
Yeah.
Why take that gamble first, whether the court approves of it in its current form?
Exactly.
Why not bring in a safe version of it,
and the interesting
if
thing
that can be done?
that actually you described it as the big story, but actually from a maybe a polling, from an electorate point of view, the big story is the reduction in inflation. That's been lost.
Yeah, but it won't be, because the big story, when it's cheap, nobody cares. They only care when it gets expensive, don't they?
But what's so interesting about the Rwanda story is that actually voters don't really pay much attention to this. What they're really paying attention to is whether their mortgage rate has gone up or whether electricity
but they are paying
has gone
attention
up.
to the immigration problem. The immigration problem is still a massive problem.
But it's not in the top three in terms of voters' preferences.
No, it really is. Trust me,
the attitude of Rishi Sunak, the first attitude of hurrah, we've lost.
Yeah.
This will stand them in very good stead over the next year or so.
Well, the other thing, the reason I think it's a bit of a distraction, and I take your point that it doesn't always pop up as one of the things that people care about, but on doorsteps, and any politician you talk to will say it does pop up, because it's in every single part of Britain now where people have been affected. People have been affected. Hang on.
Nobody
I'm not talking about...
will end up in Rwanda.
No, nobody... No, I'm not
Apart from the Rwandans.
No, I'm talking about immigration in general, right? Because even if this was to work, even if he was to somehow pull some rabbit out of a hat, there would still be about 174,500 people waiting to be processed here who couldn't go to Rwanda anyway.
But
so it's a complete shibboleth.
Somebody just asked the question, what is the great attraction of Rwanda? Why not the Ascension Islands or or
Well, the RAF said they wouldn't fly them there.
St. Helena.
Well, I mean, you know, who wants to go where Napoleon went? I mean, at the end of the day, Rwanda is a place where people have sent refugees before. The UNHCR has sent refugees there. Israel has sent refugees there. Norway has. Libya has.
Because
so it's not safe for refugees.
For Rwanda, it's great business. I mean, the best exchange was between the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, who said it was ungodly to send people to Rwanda.
Yes.
But the Primate of Rwanda said it was perfectly okay. So perhaps the solution is to send Justin Welby to Rwanda and bring the Primate of Rwanda to Canterbury.
I would vote
if ever there was an institution that had a schism within it, then it's the Church of England.
I would vote for that. Let's go back to the other question.
Add a small point
Please.
on inflation.
Yes.
It may well be that voters care more about inflation than about Rwanda or migration figures overall. But there is something to be said today for prioritizing the Rwanda story, because that is something that is under the government's control. Whereas inflation, that is really the Bank of England, that is monetary policy. That's not Sunak's achievement.
Yeah.
He's been boasting about it.
Yes. There are definitely two things to say. One, I think it isn't necessarily just about immigration, it's about fairness.
Yeah.
And I think what the electorate, which is, I keep repeating, you know, at some point in the next 12 months, they are going to get to decide on who's going to be the next government. And I think they're very keen to think about fairness, and therefore the whole issue around illegal
but people
immigration
think about
really,
fairness less if they feel as if they're being treated badly.
and that's why
thing.
I think Rishi feels that he needs to go big on this particular topic, not because
but he's wrong.
But at the same time, it is something that people think about. They think about, am I a fair country? Because we were very supportive of refugees that came from Ukraine, for example. People were very supportive about that. And from Hong Kong as well.
Yeah, but not everybody was, and that's the point. You know, the more squeezed that people become, the less fair they become, and the less kind they become.
Realistically, if you went into the polling booth or you asked, you know, in focus groups, you go into the focus group, people would they say, OK, my mortgage has tripled, my electricity bills have gone through the roof, but, you know, they've saved 400
but people say all sorts of
people
things,
going to Rwanda, I am now going to vote Conservative.
No.
I just don't think that's going to happen.
Well, no, probably not. But the point is people say all sorts of things in focus groups that they don't really even understand because they don't want to admit to being horrible. Most people are quite horrible when they're feeling down and out and they feel as if they're being put upon and they feel as if their community's changing and they haven't got any money. And then they're really going to start voting for things that they want to see improving their lives.
Not as the inflation rate coming down, a price worth paying for sky-high interest rates, which incidentally, at least the last 4 or 5 interest rate hikes have got nothing to do with this fall in inflation. I mean, you know, is it worth having inflation down when you can't afford your mortgage, when your business is being wrecked and all the rest of it? Getting punishment beatings from the Bank of England, I don't know. So it doesn't seem to me. Look, the Conservative Party cannot win an election with sky-high interest rates. It's just impossible.
Well, I don't think they can win an election,
and it won't be done
period.
over the next...
I mean, I don't think they certainly can't win an election with Rishi Sunak. But let me ask you the other question that was put to me about a politician. Why can we not ban marches of any kind, political marches of any kind, for one weekend of the year? Well, that would be Armistice weekend.
I suppose my dad, who actually fought in the last war, would have said because that's what he was fighting for. I don't think you would have political marches on Remembrance Sunday. In fact, the cenotaph is the only ceremony of state that's worth a damn, in my opinion. It's the only ceremony which actually, through its simplicity, is dignified and proper, as opposed to being political and ostentatious.
Although I noticed the SNP leader was holding his wreath upside down.
No, he wasn't actually. I mean, I've got very little time for the Scottish National Party, but Scottish wreaths are actually the other way around because there's no leaf on the poppy. He didn't sing the national anthem, which I must say, given that you're representing, and given the SNP is a monarchist party, and given you're representing a whole country, is probably a bit small-minded.
I haven't actually asked what the SNP's policy is on the armed forces. Would they have their own?
Well, I don't think the SNP's gone past. I mean, a lot of things have changed since I left leading the SNP, but I don't recall it going pacifist. It doesn't like war, of course, but that's a perfectly honourable point of view to be against war and for peace, but that doesn't mean you lay down all your arms.
Well, exactly right, but that's the thing. Anyway, let's talk about the BBC, because it's my favourite bugbear. We've got a clip here from the BBC, because once again, they've had to apologise for getting something wrong. And this is BBC News, by the way. Have a look at this.
And now an apology from the BBC. BBC News, as it covered initial reports that Israeli forces has entered Gaza's main hospital. We said that medical teams and Arab speakers were being targeted. This was incorrect and misquoted a Reuters report. We should have said IDF forces included medical teams and Arabic speakers for this operation. So we apologise for this error, which fell below our usual editorial standards.
So, their usual editorial standards. So,
understatement of the year.
Yeah, and this is the third time they've done it, right? So this is the story that they got wrong. The story was that the IDF had gone into a hospital with medical people, with the assistance of the medical people who were in the hospital. They'd gone out to find the Hamas tunnels, and they'd gone out to find Hamas and possibly some hostages inside the hospital because they knew that they were there. They'd also brought with them some Arab speakers to make sure that when conversations were being had, they were being had in the right tone and in the right language and all of that. BBC changed that to say that not only were they not bringing medical people with them, they were singling out medical people as if they were going to shoot them, and they were singling out Arab speakers as if they were going to kill them. That was extraordinary, isn't it?
Far be it from me to defend my bugbear of the BBC, who've been getting Scotland wrong for the last 20 years and have never apologised. But, if they got something wrong, they've apologised. Perhaps it was some poor hapless newsreader late
this
at
is
night
the third time.
trying to make out the autocue.
First of all, it was it was an interview with a journalist, and she wasn't corrected by the anchor. And BBC have form on this. They are refusing to call
Yeah, well, they've
Hamas,
also had, let's not
Hamas
forget, Alex.
terrorists.
Well, first of all, they still don't call Hamas terrorist organisation. They say they are prescribed and described by the British government as terrorists.
I did see John Simpson explain that, although I must say, for John Simpson, it wasn't the most eloquent explanation.
No, John Simpson did not explain it well. But they also, don't forget, when that rocket supposedly hit another hospital, and the BBC correspondent said it could only have been an Israeli missile because nothing else causes that kind of damage. Not only did it turn out to be not an Israeli missile, not only did it turn out to have just been an explosion in a car park, which had been sent by Islamic Jihad, misfiring their own missile. So they got all of that wrong as well, but they're broadcasting stuff, and this is and as a result of that broadcast about the hospital being hit by an Israeli missile, there were demonstrations in Tehran, in Cairo, in all sorts of parts of the Arab world because they thought the Israelis had deliberately fired a rocket into a hospital.
I don't quite understand why Hamas can't be called a terrorist organisation because it inflicts terror.
Well, because they are.
But I do have some sympathy with broadcasting organisations that make mistakes, if they apologise for the mistakes. As I say, the BBC, to my mind, never apologised for the mistakes in Scotland.
These are not just mistakes, though. These are, I think, more than that.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. I mean, this is a fairly systematic mistake.
Yeah.
It would be one thing if, say, they phrased something in a clumsy way, use a word, maybe that's a bit too strong or something, but they used the word targeted. That does make you wonder about the process behind that. What went on there?
Right.
Because it's not as if there was some close synonym for targeted, which they maybe wanted to choose instead or something. This is a pretty strong word.
Right. And I think in a war zone, when you are dealing with some very, very, hot subjects and some very fast-moving stories, they should be double careful. You don't just put out any old rubbish that somebody's reported. Just
but the
because
news,
you wait.
Because the news cycle is now accelerated so much that I think they really fear being caught out by some of these other stations.
Yeah.
So they're not verifying things and they're not fact-checking.
But I think if it had been a conspiracy, it had been insidious, as you put it, it'd be a lot more subtle than the broadcast that I saw.
Well, we know, though, Alex, and you're being very unusually kind to the BBC.
Well, because I'm trying to give you some debate. And
but the point is that we know that the BBC is a biased organisation. Every organisation has a bias. They happen to have a left-wing bias.
Like, we agree. We both agree that the BBC is a biased organisation. We just disagree about what it's biased about.
Yeah, well, I mean, what they say is, well, if everybody calls us biased, then we must not be. Which is a very odd thing to say, to be honest.
The problem in this case also wasn't that they didn't verify something. It's more that they implied that Reuters press release.
Well, they reported something that wasn't true.
Well, and also, it has a longer legacy because if people start to think, OK, you got that wrong about that particular story, I can't really trust you about the rest of your output.
In Israel, there's a comedy show where they lampoon the BBC on a regular basis, and where they have the BBC anchors just absolutely saying anything that's negative about Israel, which is what they kind of get up to.